this tool. Hey, good morning, everyone, and good to see you today when we will talk about Microsoft Teams environments. So I'm currently in Düsseldorf at the conference and I'm in the speaker room. So hopefully it will work out. So this is the fourth part of our series about Microsoft Teams management and monitoring everything. So what we will do today is, first of all, I want to say hi to our moderators, which are Juan Carlos and Miguel. And also then I will hand over to my awesome colleague, which is Ståle. Have a good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm fine, thank you for asking. And today we're going to cover the Learn module on monitoring Microsoft Teams. And you can follow along as well. If you are on the Learn module, you can read up on the objectives, you can do the questions, but most importantly, you can get your questions answered. If you have any questions, if you wonder about this, remember, we do have some awesome MVP moderators with us today that will answer your questions and maybe even bubble up some questions for us. The topics for today are how to analyze patterns by monitoring Microsoft 365 and Teams usage reports, how to monitor user access by using Azure AD access reviews, interpret Microsoft productivity score. I'm looking forward to walk you through that. It's a very interesting topic. And then also assess network readiness by using Microsoft 365 network connectivity dashboard. And I'm going to demo that by the end of today. And I believe this is the best networking tool that Microsoft has released for Teams and these kinds of tools to date. So I'm going to show you why. And then we're going to talk about notifications and alerts and what you can get there. Remember, we are live. We are interactive. We do have some moderators here that can help us. So again, say hi, where you're from, on the platform you're at. If it's YouTube, Twitch, Learn TV, let us know. And yeah, get your questions ready. Let's start with Microsoft Teams usage reports. And this is in the Teams admin center, where you can go in under reports and look at usage reports. What you can see there is how many users communicated with channel and chat messages. I'm going to show you that. And I think this is the most interesting report, especially in terms of Teams culture, because we do want people to move away from chats and over to channel conversations. And we've talked about that in the previous modules, why you want to do that. So I encourage you to go and take a look at those if you weren't part of those sessions, because like chat, that's like private conversations, channel conversations are where processes happen. Understand the kinds of devices they use to connect to Teams, and understand usage patterns for that you can use in terms of what can you do for training, how are people meeting up, and how are people using PSN calls, and so on and so forth. To access the Teams reports in the Teams admin center, you need either a global admin in Microsoft 365, a Teams service administrator, or a Sky for Business admin. I do believe that the Sky for Business admin is going away, so I wouldn't use that as the default option. So use the Teams admin to give access to this. But as you see, though, is that you do need quite a lot of access in order to view the reports in the Teams admin center. but I'm going to show you how you can export some of the content so that, for instance, an analytics team, for instance, can massage the numbers and create some cool reports based on these activities. The first report we're going to talk about is Teams usage. So the Teams usage is how many active users do you have, and how many of them are actually using channel conversations, and how many active channels do you have? What's like the overall feel of your environment? If you then know at the same time how many teams you have and look at the active users, active channels, and so on and so forth, you can start seeing if you have a lot of channels and a lot of teams that may not be that active, and then can warrant a reason to investigate. Next one is user activity. So here you see the difference between one-to-one calls, channel conversations, and chat messages. And I think this is a trend you should pay attention to. And the reason for that is that we want to see a trend, especially after you have done some culture training in your environment, telling users to move more away from running processes in chat and moving those over to channel conversations. Then you should see a trend here where you should see less chat and more channel conversations, because that gives you the indication on an overall level if you're going in the right direction. So I think this one is very interesting, and looking at this can give you some pointers on that. But I'm guessing chats will always be higher than for channel conversations. But hopefully you can then see a trend by comparing to yourself after you've done some training, some awareness on this topic. Here you also see one-to-one calls. And as we talked about earlier, what is a one-to-one call? Well, typically it's an ad hoc call where I call Martina and we are having a call. I initiate that from the chat maybe, or from a channel, but it's just us in the call. And but it could also be me calling Martina's cell phone number. That's also a one-to-one call. So these are all the calls, all the one-to-one calls in the platform. And then we are looking at the app usage report. And this is also interesting. If you have introduced a new app, for instance, Viva Connections, maybe Viva Insights, which are also apps, or even the Tasks app, you can see that how many users are actually clicking on those. Because as you will see, the activity, chats, teams, and so on, they will have a high level of activity. How high level of number of users that are using those. But I just looked in our own tenant yesterday, and it was kind of discouraging, actually, seeing so few using the Viva Insights app, for instance. But that also again gives a pointer that, hey, we need to maybe do another awareness post or post something about, hey, you should use the Viva Insights app, because that's where you have virtual commute, you can give praise, and so on and so forth. But it also applies to other applications, third parties you have invested in, and seeing that people are not using them as intended. And then you can encourage people to use them more. Moving forward with the Teams device usage, what kind of devices are users using to access the platform? For instance, if you are not using a certain platform and then you see a high number of users using them, then maybe you should investigate that. But it's interesting to see that people are spread out across the different platforms as well, which shows that they're not just using the desktop. They are using the mobile. They are using the web. So that you know that it's a platform and a product that users are using more than just logging onto the computer, which is interesting as well. So you can glean some information out of this.
So may I ask you a question about that? So from your experience, what is the most used app within Teams? Have you any favorites, or are you pinning specific apps for them?
Yes. Of course, the default apps are the most used, like chats and
Chat
Teams and
and
so on,
call. Yeah.
and calls. I see less calls actually. You can go through your day without clicking the calls app because you can initiate calls from meetings, you initiate calls from the Teams app and the chat app. So that's also something I saw. But I also see files is a heavily used one, because that's where we have our files. But we are also pinning, using pinning of apps in as a policy, as we talked about in the previous session, where we are pinning tasks and Viva Insights, but still doesn't mean that people will actually use them. What's
Yeah.
your experience, Martina?
So what I learned is if you start pinning apps and bring that into visibility in the Teams client, the usage kind of goes up very fast because people say, oh, there's a new app and my admin added it for me and I'm curious what to do here. And this is what I like. But normally also from what I do daily, it's chat and Teams and calls. So the default apps. And I use the calendar a lot. So I'm not switching back and forth between Outlook and Teams. I go all through Teams and use the calendar here to
Yeah.
join meetings and so on.
Interesting though. I just looked in our environment and just had a quick look, and almost no one is using the calendar app for some reason. So they
It's
apparently
funny.
they're still in
I use
Outlook.
it all the time. I use it all the time.
But that's a good indication, right? If people are actually using the calendar app, because if they're not, they're actually living in Outlook, right?
Yeah, that's
So
true.
it's a good indication and good to reflect on these numbers you're seeing. But at the same time, you need to look at these numbers, but then maybe do a survey, maybe use other sources as well to verify that
Yeah.
this is so.
Yeah.
What else do we have? Live event usage report. So this one is after the fact, not before the fact. We investigated that, especially when we started seeing a lot more live events, moving to home offices and doing all hands meetings, and those kind of activities. We weren't able to predict how many live events there were going to be, because there's a limit, which is still at, I believe it's 50 now, 50 concurrent live events. But before that, before Microsoft actually increased that level, it was, I believe it was 15 concurrent live events. And then suddenly that you could actually hit a limit there. But I'm not experienced hitting a limit on 50 concurrent live events. Maybe you have, Martina, but the problem here is planning for capacity, but you can still look at trends, right?
Yeah, and I see large companies are using a lot of live events. And it could happen that you have a lot running in parallel, but normally no one does 50 live events at the same time. But it could happen. I had some cases 1 year ago when this limit was hit.
But still, we can look at the trend and see if you're about to hit that, or like, are we even close? Is it an issue, or are we like 20 max, for instance? That's interesting. PSN Minute Pool. So when you have a both, you have the communication credits and you have calling plans, know that minutes are pooled on a tenant level. And this report shows you how many minutes you have available for each month, and also how many minutes you are actually using. And this is something you need to pay attention to, especially for the communication credits, that you have enough communication credits. How are people using that? If you use dial in a lot from for audio conferencing, for instance, because that consumes communication, or dial out, I mean, sorry, that consumes communication credits. So this is something you should look into, look at the trends, But if you have calling plan and you have like 1,000 users, you do have a lot of minutes. And pay attention to that, which means that one user can use more than their license would say they are using, because the minutes are pooled on a tenant level. And this report shows you that. PSN usage on calling plans and direct routing, how many calls there are on this, what kind of type of usage it is. And because you can combine calling plans with direct routing, with Operator Connect and so on, you can look at like how many are using those different platforms. So you can switch between calling plans and direct routing. So there are some calling-based or PSN-based reports in here as well. But as I told you, you are able to export these reports if you want to maybe put them in Power BI, maybe you want to massage them a bit, or look at like the bigger trends, the bigger picture within your organization. You are able to make the report and then have the platform created so that you can download it. And from there, you can give access to this data outside of the admin rights that you need, because you need a Teams administrator or you need a global admin to view these reports. So you just got a comment here from Learn TV from Hilde. The calendar app in Teams, Martina, is great.
See, it's true. Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
So moving on to what can you look at usage reports in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, Martina?
Yeah, so just give me a second. I have to switch to my deck. So monitoring Microsoft 365 usage reports means we have a usage analytics here, which provides you a better view of how your organization is adopting various services within Microsoft 365. And what I really like about those usage reports is they're available for a week, for a month, up to 120 days. And you can look at the different services and select it. So if we look at the usage report, and this is present in the Microsoft Admin Center. So if you go to admin.microsoft.com, and here you have a reporting section on the left, and then you go into the usage scenario, and you can see how the different services are used. And this is kind of an example of a typical usage scenario where you see how many active users do I have, and how are they acting between the selected services. So for instance, this is a tenant which shows me there's low Yammer usage, because that's the last line. But you see all usage around Office 365 and Exchange and OneDrive and SharePoint is pretty in the same range. And the little breaks between that usage scenario is always weekends. And this is also kind of funny because you see it everywhere, how it looks like. And then we have our Microsoft Teams reports in the Office 365 Admin Center. And to show those reports, you need to be either a global admin or you have a product-specific admin role. So for instance, you can have Teams, Exchange, or SharePoint reader roles. And what I see a lot, because normally adoption people are looking at those usage reports, for those people, it's required, if you go least privilege, it's required to go into the report reader role and look from there. So, and also what you can see here is, for instance, if you look at the Teams usage report, so like we have it here, we can see how our Microsoft service, Microsoft Teams is used. So here, for instance, you see how many users are licensed, how are they using it for the last 30 days. And you can also look here how it looks like what are they doing within Microsoft Teams. So as Ståle already said, it's all depending on the apps and the app location within Teams where you have it. And here you see, for instance, our users are using a lot of channel messages, one-to-one chats, but they are also using calling reports in here and have other activities within their Teams chats. And then, for instance, if you are using different devices within your usages, you can go into the Teams device usage reports. And here you get a lot of information how your users connect to Teams. So you see how is the usage on mobile devices, how is the usage on Windows, what kind of operating systems are your Teams user uses. And this gives you also an indication what you want to do and how they connect to Teams and use the Teams application. And then you can dig a little bit deeper because you can also go into the usage information for specific users. So that means you can use those service reports to research how much a specific user is using the service. So you can generate a report, go into the user account, and then get the list which services they are using and how much. So for instance, if a new user shows up as unknown, that could happen if it's a new user, he is not synced properly and so on. And there could be a delay in creating those user profile within the reporting service. So just be patient. The user will show up with his username soon, and you can look at it and also give that specific user information. So for instance, I use those reports to investigate if a user says, I can't connect, I do not see all services and so on. I can look at the user and look at the user information which he has here. So and this is also a very popular question. So what happens if a user is closed? So a user account is closed, it's disabled, and what happens to that usage data? So it's really important whenever you close a user account, Microsoft will delete the usage data within 30 days. So if you want to keep those user data, you can still go into the portal and export everything from usage reports and put it into an Excel sheet or anything else. But normally from Microsoft perspective, they will delete it after 30 days. So, and our next section would be, Ståle, what's about the productivity score on your side? So how are you using that?
I love the productivity score, but we have shown like 2 places where you can look at usage report. We looked at team-specific usage reports. Then you, Martina, walked us through what can you look for, like in a Microsoft 365 level of user reports, how many users are using this, and that, and so on. What the productivity score looks at is how you use the tools, which means that we look at okay, so we have this many users using Teams, but we have but this is how they use it. So if you look at the productivity score, it's divided into different areas. You have metrics, insights, and recommended actions. And then you have 2 levels of how the productivity score is scored. It's on people experience and technology experience. And I believe that the technology experience, which you're going to look at later today when we're looking at the networking, is maybe for the first time ever in the platform, Microsoft is bubbling up. How is the platform actually performing? Typically, you are kind of in the dark, like you're hoping it's okay, but you are maybe not. You are maybe not able to verify it, and so on. So that's what you use the technology score for. But the people experiences is also interesting. And what I really like about those, I'm going to drill down in these different and show you where to find them. But Microsoft actually tells you why you should use meetings, why you should work with documents online, not just that you should do it, but here's the research on why it means. And they even have some numbers based on research. I think it's probably independent research, but maybe not. So let's have a look at that. When looking at the productivity score, it's like the same as the secure score and compliance score. It's not like I would say champagne goals. Don't celebrate that you get a specific score. Because in the next day or next week, or Microsoft will add stuff or remove stuff. Maybe you add some licenses, which means that you are measured in a different way, and so on. So look at those as benchmarks for how you're doing, but benchmark towards yourself and compare with yourself. The prerequisites that you have for looking at the productivity score, you can be a global admin, Exchange admin, SharePoint admin, Skype for Business admin, even Teams admin, but you can also be a global reader, reports reader, and usage summary reports reader. So all these have access to the productivity score, so it's a bit more accessible, especially than the Teams usage reports.
That's true. And also, I use the productivity score, for instance, if a client tells us, okay, how is our usage for using video and web calls? So this is also an information you can get out of the productivity score.
Yes. But when I ask people, like, have you looked at the productivity score? And they say no. And I was like, why? No, we didn't know it was useful, but it is. Everyone should look at the productivity score, and it can only get better. So again, your organization score, that's what you're going to look at. And you also have some like peer benchmarks, like companies, organizations, tenants that are similar to yourself in terms of number of users, the type of licenses you have. But again, the score may change without you taking action. So just be aware of that. So I want to show you this because it needs to be seen. So by logging into the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, you have the that's where you find the productivity score, and you need to click Show All, and then you go to Reports, and you find the productivity score here. By going to the productivity score, it will load up the score. If you haven't been here before, it may take up to 24 hours before you get useful information. So make sure that you go into the score and trigger it and start it if you haven't done that already. Here you will see, as we talked about, people experience, and then you will see technology experience. What you also will see is that if you remove this, you also will see is your score. Our organization score is 70%, total score 560 out of 800. And that is actually based on, I think it's about 100 points per mode here. So we have like 8 modes that it's measuring. So that's what that's where the points are located. But you can also go into docs in order to see like what the breakdown is like. Again, don't like, this is not, we shouldn't like get fired if you go below 600 because it could be out of your control. It's more like a benchmark, a measurement. So what you have here is the people experience. And this is where the productivity score differs from the reports we're reviewing. Like those are looking at that we are using it, but this is how we are using it. And if you go into communication, what I really like about this, if we zoom in here a bit, you see that Microsoft has some like research shows, and this is great, right? Research, when you use that phrase, then you know it's great. that using real-time communication tools creates a more unified organization and builds employee morale regardless of location. That is the advantage of using communication, real-time communication in Teams, for instance. And there is a link here to see the evidence as well. And it will show you the actual report. And I urge you to actually read through the report in order for you to learn the language of the report, in order for you to build your own business case for why we should use more training, for instance, on these to get to use this more. But again, the measurement is org-wide. It's very generic. It's very generalizing. So here is people using more than one mode of to communicate. And that means that they are using email, messages, community posts, which is Yammer, messages is Teams, and then of course email. So here you see that people are using multiple modalities to communicate, for instance. So that's the trend we are looking at here. But then it breaks it even more down, like how many people are sending emails, how many people are using Teams. And in this organization, it's such a small organization that they haven't implemented and using Yammer. So that's why you're seeing no posts in communities. And how many new email threads with @mentions, for instance? Are people having conversations in emails? And is that something we want to happen in our organization? And also, how many people are using Teams channels to communicate? 100% is using Teams channels, which is great. But then you need to look behind the numbers and see the difference between, okay, how much chat, how much channel conversations are happening. So I think this is super interesting. Going over to meetings. And this one's heavy, people. Let me zoom in on this. Research shows, and already you know it's great, that when people use online meeting tools such as Teams meetings, such as Teams webinars, live events, they improve the quality of the meetings and can save up to 104 minutes per week. Oh my God. And then you still have the link to the evidence where that is posted. So this drives the reason for why we want to use this. Of course, you need to look at your own organization and see like how does this benefit us? How do we do a lot of remote work and so on and so forth? And how does this work for us? But now that we're going more and more back to hybrid meetings and on-site meetings, then this metric becomes very interesting. But what you probably would see is that people are doing more online meetings now than 2 years ago. And also, how long is this data available? So in this view, the overarching view, it's 180 days. In this view, I believe it's 30 days. Which means that the more granular view is 30 days, but the larger picture is 180 days. So, but this is also interesting. And this plays again into Viva Insights and what Viva Insights want to measure. But in Viva Insights, you can dive even more into these details. But you see that 56% of people spend over 10 hours in meetings a week. And also you see how many meetings are long and short. And then you have instant meetings, those like ad hoc meetings, how long they are, and so on. So and here we see 1% actually of people participate in instant meetings in channels, which means that, okay, we don't do ad hoc channel meetings in our organization. Is that something we want to encourage? Meet now in channels. Should we do that instead of you and me, Martina, meeting and then dragging people in if it's a project discussion? Maybe we should do it in a channel and people can join in to listen in, for instance. What's your experience on that scenario?
So what I see a lot, and we use that also all the time, and in those scenarios, and it's kind of interesting. And we also got some comments on Twitch about that. It's like, can you also support meeting habits with analysis out of the productivity score, for instance? So one of the comments was, we do not have any meeting rooms anymore. So we have a lot of back-to-back meetings because everyone works from home and has now everything. And the meeting room is where you are. So like today for me, my meeting room is just a meeting room somewhere. And what we learned here out of the productivity score is that we learned what is the usage and how can we improve the meeting experience for each and any user within there. So this is what I think about how to use that. And I think it's a really great adoption tool.
Yes. But if you want to dive more into this and look at like, okay, if our organization only have back-to-back meetings, when do they get time to work? And that's
also,
then I urge you to look into Viva Insights as well, because that's what Viva Insights does. It breaks it down.
Yeah, and also good meeting practices is to start on time and also to finish on time, or finish a little bit earlier to give people some time back. And in Outlook, so back to Outlook today, we have a functionality where you can reduce meeting time. So instead of 60 minutes, it's by default 50 minutes. And instead of 30 minutes, it's 25 minutes. And this helps a lot.
It does, because but I also experience that, okay, now you get like that 5-minute remark, and that now it should have ended, but at least we ended on the hour or the half hour. But that's a great tip, and everyone should use that. Either start the meeting later or end it sooner. And my experience is I would like both, actually, but that's not possible. But I would rather start it earlier and then end it earlier, instead of starting late and then end it late. That's my personal preference, at least.
Yeah, and we have another question on Twitch. So is there any update on being able to schedule meeting in private channels?
Not that I know of, in terms of an update on that.
Yeah, me not either, because private channels are kind of a special scenario within Microsoft Teams, and some things will appear later.
Yep. And then content collaboration. Let's look at that. Let's look at the research here, people, because that's what's interesting here. When people collaborate with online files, this is why you should use online files. Is that each person saves an average of 100 minutes or almost 2 hours per week just by working with online files in OneDrive, in SharePoint, in Teams, which means you have co-authoring and so on. So this is interesting, because this is one of the benefits you want to have by going to the cloud and using OneDrive and so on. And then you see that how are people using this? How are people, and here we see a number of readers, creators, and collaborators. So a creator is someone saving a file, someone opening the file without doing any edits is a reader, and then collaborators is that you have multiple people actually working on the file. So this actually measures co-authoring and working with those files. So this measures the actual level of people working smarter in SharePoint and OneDrive. If you see a low number of collaborators and maybe readers here, then probably people are just using OneDrive and SharePoint to just store files and look at their files, but not like save time by working on the same PowerPoint, creating a sales proposal, for instance, in the same document. Because what takes time back in the days was that we needed to create our own stuff, and then someone had to sit and merge everything, and stuff got lost, stuff got overwritten. Then you had like conflicts of formatting, and so on and so forth. Now people can work directly in the documents and they are finished. One interesting thing here, though, is that 100% of people in this organization share files as an email attachment. Oh my God. Maybe the reason for this is external communication. I don't know. But yeah, they share physical files. This is not good. What do you think, Martina?
Yeah, this is always when people continue to use Outlook and use email attachment, you have a couple of risks here involved. So for instance, you have data loss prevention risks. So people are just sharing that. And from a collaboration perspective, this is also imagine you are sending out one file to 20 people, and then you get 20 versions of the same file back, and you have to consolidate that. So this is called email trees. And this is also, it's time consuming and it's not modern collaboration. So it's very good to have teams share the file, do co-authoring, work on the same environment, and so on.
But what could be interesting here is to see the difference between external and internal, for instance, because at least internally, you should never attach a file. At best, attach a link, but even better, don't send that email in the first place. Thank you.
This is what I wanted to say. So try to reduce internal emails. It's extremely helpful if you go into channel conversations or into chats within Teams and try to do the collaboration work within Microsoft Teams if you are internally.
Yeah. And that's what this first one is measuring, right? Number of emails versus conversations and so on. So we had content collaboration and then we have teamwork. So let's look at the research here. And let's see, research shows, and again, you know it's going to be great, that when people share information and collaborate in shared workspace, they can save up to 4 hours per week. So how many hours have we saved now? I think we saved almost a day already by working smarter in Microsoft 365. But this is actually not a joke. This is real life, people, because too often we see that people are getting access to new, smarter technology, but they use it like it was 1995. And they use like the old way of working in the new platform, and you're not getting the productivity benefits of the platform that you should have gotten. So this is why this is very interesting to look at the org-wide level, to look at how people are collaborating within your organization. So 82% of people in your org are contributing to shared workspaces, which means that we are discussing in shared workspaces. And this is more on the sending emails and messages and creating and reading content. And for activity types, you see engagements, you see reactions, and so on. So how they are actually using this platform. Not that they are just using the files, but they're also using the platform to collaborate in a smarter way. So here you see 26% of shared workspaces. So this could be Teams, it could be Yammer communities, and so on. What type of engagement do they have? So we do have some people that are not that engaged, but then you see a high level of people are very engaged as well. And also what kind of type of collaboration spaces that you see here. So that's the productivity score. So I think this is very interesting because it gives you an overview of what is going on within your organization. Not just that people have gotten access to it, but they are actually using it in a more modern way. So the last thing here is mobility. For mobility, they are measuring Outlook and Teams across platforms. So people with sales roles, senior managers, consultants, and others, like all the information workers, I believe, need to work away from office to be productive, like today, right? So improvements for these workers have a large impact. So we don't have like a specific number here, But I agree with this. So what we're measuring here, that how many people are using Outlook across multiple platforms. No one is using desktop only, either email or mobile, or they are using web or so on. But we do have some mobile only users here, and it depends on what kind of users you have in your organization. The same with Teams. No one uses only desktop, which means that some users use it both on mobile, use it on web, use it on the desktop. So again, this is very interesting, because are people using those two communication platforms not just by automatically signing into it because it was installed on their computer, but they're actually actively using it on other platforms as well. So this gives a great indication of how your platform is being used. And this gives you a trend, which again, you can use as a reason for why to investigate further.
Also, when I think about the productivity score, it's a great tool, and I'm using it a lot with customers to get more knowledge about the usage of their services. And this is really great to have it in here and get some analysis. Sometimes I get some feedback around, okay, this is not good to have it here for instance, if we speak about GDPR or privacy reasons. So some customers are really concerned about that, but I see a lot of benefits out of productivity score.
Yep. And that was my demo. Now we have a knowledge check, people. We have talked about the different ways of reporting. So Eric is the team's administrator in Contoso Limited. Eric wants to know about the time spent by people in meetings. Which of the following reports in Microsoft productivity score should Eric use? Communication report, teamwork report, or meetings report? And we remember, right? Communication report is what kind of tools we use to communicate. Teamwork is how are we communicating in platforms with multiple participants, and then meetings are how are we looking into how meetings are being used. So, what do you think, Martina? What do you think is the correct answer here?
So for me, this is kind of a challenging question when I look at that. But I would think a good information would be if I want to have meeting and want to see how much time are users spending in meetings, I would go for the meetings report for that one.
Yeah, I would so too, because it says like you want to look at how meetings are being used, and there is an option here called meetings report. Very difficult to choose something else. But then the question is it the correct answer?
So
right?
let's take a look.
Let's have a look. Drum roll. And it was the meetings report.
Yeah.
And if you just go back, look at meetings, you will see that here 56% of people spend over 10 hours a week in meetings. So that is what you wanted to look at. Moving forward with what can we do with Azure Active Directory access reviews, Martina?
Yeah, and this is, if you look at what I do, or my part today is more looking into what you are doing from an admin perspective. And if we have that present here in our user access with Azure Active Directory Access Review, I like that a lot, because with Access Review, you can delegate access to your users or to your information workers and so on. So for instance, if you think about what is Azure Active Directory Access Review, it gives control back to the users. So that means you can monitor who has access to groups, who has access to applications, is it employees or guests, and so on. And what you can do here is, and this is what I like a lot out of a governance perspective as well, like we discussed it already last week, is you can schedule regular reviews or perform ad hoc reviews of your most important teams, of your most important groups. And you can look at that. And if you have that review, you are giving back control to the owner. So think about that example that you say, okay, I have a very important team, and there are specific guests in there, and I need a regular review if the guest should still have access to the team, or if I should revoke access. And also, if you look at that, it's also, you get an information. So how long is the access? Did the user even log in into the Microsoft team? You are doing that, and so on. And it's a very good access from a delegation perspective. So if we go in the user flow, how it is here, and you can find it in Azure Active Directory, to have it here. So in Azure Active Directory, if you go into information governance, you have access reviews here. And what you are doing here is you set up a schedule, and then you said, okay, I want to have my owners confirm our guests in a specific team. So the request is sent to specific users or to resource owners. And then that owner reviews the current membership of the team he's working with. And then he can say, okay, oh, I don't need Martina any longer, or he confirms that Martina is still working on that project. So he confirms the access review. And then he can also say, yeah, Martina is still working on the project, but Tony is not. So at the same time, through the access review, he can remove stale memberships and have that. And then you get a report back to the admin. And the beauty of that, of access review, is it gives control back to owners of teams, to specific users. And on the other side, you see also how a life cycle works in your team. So this is also something which is really important if you look at that. So think about that, and to make a short summary about that. So access reviews, they are part of Azure Active Directory, and admin can set it up, but you can control the collaboration. So you can still control, are users still needed in specific teams? Are specific apps needed there, and so on? And this is a great tool to manage risk in your scenarios. So consider it's a very large tenant, and you have to manage that. And also from a governance and compliance perspective, you can address that, and you can say, okay, I want to have a good life cycle in here. And also thinking about life cycle, we had a specific module around life cycle management last week. And if you look at that, life cycle is really important. You can't just set up teams and they are here forever. So access reviews help you here as well. And also, the last point, and also a great benefit, is you can reduce costs with that, because it works natively out of Azure Active Directory. So if you have the proper license here, which is part of ADP2, you can do access reviews and have them in here. So that means, as a prerequisite, we have, from a licensing perspective, we need Azure Active Directory Premium P2 or any other license where it is already included. And a global administrator or user administrator can set up the rules and policies around access reviews. And that means he sets up the rule set, but the owners of the teams can do that by themselves. And also, you can do Microsoft 365 group owner reviews and security group owner reviews as well. So you see, we really have a lot of benefits in here. If you want to do it by yourself, I just show you a small highlight. You can go into portalazure.com, and from there, you can create one or more access review. So first of all, we go into Azure Active Directory, into identity governance, and then we create an access review. So how does it look like? In the admin center, we create a new access review, and then we said, okay, what is our group type? And the group type here is, we said, okay, we want to have the access review on teams and groups. And then you see here, you can select specific teams and groups, or you can set, okay, every single Microsoft 365 group who has a guest user already needs to be reviewed. And then you can also scope the review. So that means I'm looking specifically for my guest users. And you have the guest users in here, and then you can schedule them. And how does it look like then? If you have it here, then you said, okay, my next step is I go into the group owners. So the group owner will get the notification. You can also have a fallback reviewer. Why would you need that? So consider you have an orphaned group, a group without owner. The access review wouldn't go into any mailbox. No one would review the guest in a specific team. So you can always create a fallback reviewer part in here. And then you can say, okay, what do I need here? Do I need it quarterly, daily, weekly, whenever? And then you can say, okay, in our case, it's done quarterly. And if we have it here, we can also say, okay, what is the start time? So you can also say, okay, I have a new team, and with the next quarter, the access review will start. And then you can also say it's a continuous access review in here. So that means every 4 weeks or every 8 weeks, every 12 weeks, the owner of the team gets an access review notification. Or you can also say, okay, in the settings, I do not want to have anything else for my access review. So short summary, again, if the reviewer doesn't respond, you have a risk that guests fall out of teams, they get denied, and so on. So you can also get in here and say, okay, what is if my reviewer doesn't respond? Nothing happens. So all guests stay in the team. Or you can also say, okay, I will remove it out of security reason. And there could be reasons why you would do that. Or you can also say, okay, I didn't get any response, so I will approve the access automatically. And the next part would be take recommendations, where I said, okay, this is the system recommendation. And the system recommendation, to give you an example about that, could be Tony didn't sign into this team for 90 days. So our recommendation would be to remove access to the team, because the likelihood that he will get access to the team is pretty low. So always think about that and what to do there. And also, if we look at the guest access, what we have here is if we remove a user's membership from the resource, that means the guest doesn't have any longer access to the specific team, but he is still able to sign into the tenant because he's still part of Azure Active Directory. Also, you can have a specific setting where I say, okay, I want to block my user from signing in for 30 days. And after that, I will remove him from Azure Active Directory as well. So you see, you have some kind of specific settings what you can do. And also consider, if you're removing a guest from one team, doesn't mean he isn't needed in another team. So always look at that option as well. And our last picture here is, if we go into all the settings, we see here what happens here, what happens with the user account, is the justification required? So that means, is our guest required still in our Azure Active Directory? And also we can set up some reminders here where we see, okay, how does it look like and how do we go forward? And this would be our next example. So look at that, go into the identity governance page, and in the left menu under Access Reviews, you see the settings. So how does the review process look like? So for instance, if you have specified the settings and it's rolling out into Azure Active Directory, then you go Start, and then you can look at the approval and deniers. And how does it look like? So give you an example. I'm currently Fiona from Contoso, and I'm responsible for the marketing group. And here you see I get my access reviews in here, and you see here also the recommendations I have here. So for instance, you have Miriam. She didn't sign in for longer than 30 days. And that means maybe she doesn't come back into the tenant, and maybe I do not need her anymore. And then you see the admin account, who signs in a lot and works in the team and so on. And you get the recommendation that they say, okay, I will approve them. And then if you look at that, you can just go and accept all the recommendations at once. That would mean Megan, Joanne, and Miriam do not longer have access to our group, but the administrator has. But if you want to change that, you can just overrule the recommendations and said, okay, I will keep Miriam, but Megan and Joanna are no longer working with us in that team, so I will remove the team. So you see, you can do a lot of automation through access review from an administrative perspective. So setting up the rules and the policies and work through that. So Ståle, and back to you now. Are you using access reviews?
Yes, we do in some cases, but as you said, it requires the Azure AD P2 license. So it is for those more like serious organizations that see the benefit of doing this. But historically, we have been using automation to do this, PowerShell, other Azure automation, or other automation routines to do this kind of access reviews, looking at guest users that have been in the tenant for a long time, haven't signed in for half a year, and then maybe create a list based on that, and like, what should we do with these users? But I think this is better because it's built into the platform, it's maintained by Microsoft, and it's easy for the users, and delegate this activity to the owners and the end users. So I think this is definitely worth it, and I think it's important, especially for those who are working with sensitive content, and having inactive guests having access to that content makes no sense, for instance.
Yeah, correct. And I also see access reviews. It's, if you're going towards self-service for your users, it's a great tool, and it's built into the platform. So if you have the proper license, you can still use that.
Yeah, and it's part of the business case for Azure Active Directory P2, right? So you get this, and you get so much more with Azure Active Directory P2 license. So definitely worth considering.
Yeah. But the next part is network connectivity dashboard. And I think this is your turn, Ståle.
Yes, it is. And the thing is that, and I think this is fantastic. I actually had a talk at the conference where I actually gave a talk for like 1 hour, how I use this tool to halt a team's rollout. And me boasting about like, yeah, I destroyed the project and all that. That's not the point. The point is that if we actually had rolled out, the users wouldn't be happy, because we found some flaws in the networking, how like some fundamental issues that needed to be resolved before we actually rolled out Teams meetings, Teams calls, telephony, and so on. And this is highlighted directly in this portal. What you're going to see is, and I'm going to show this because I think this is fantastic, is that you have the Microsoft 365 network connectivity that shows you the quality of your connections and gives you a network assessment, gives you a breakdown on Exchange, Teams, and SharePoint, and how they perform. And I just want to show you this. But before I do that, because it's measuring Exchange, SharePoint, and Teams. And I think this is for the first time in the platform, really, you get an understanding of how Exchange is performing, Outlook is performing, how OneDrive is performing, how Files is performing for your users. Because you typically don't get that kind of information. So this is, again, diving into the productivity score, actually, because this is part of the productivity score, where it gives you a benchmark on how it's actually experienced by the user. Not that users are using it, but what are the experience using it? And this is very interesting. So what is good quality for Exchange? Good quality for Exchange is that if it's 350 milliseconds of latency between Outlook or the client and the service, which is Exchange Online, that's not good. But you get a full score if it's 10 milliseconds or less. And this again plays into best practices on how to connect to Exchange Online and Office 365. Should you have like a globally centralized breakout? So which means that those in the US need to break out through Europe in order to access the tenant. Is that a good idea? Probably not, because then your latency would be in the hundreds or 200s here, and you get a lower score. So that's the indication that you see, like the distance to your Exchange connectivity. For SharePoint, we measure throughput. So the file download speed is what we're measuring. And typically what we see here is between 4 and 8 megabits per second. That's kind of like the normal, but it should preferably be around 14 and maybe 20 megabits per second. So this is actually what we measure on this. And if you get like 2 megabits per second, that's not good. So you get fewer points for that. For Teams, we are measuring what we as Teams administrators, as Sky for Business administrators, those us deploying real-time communication have been looking at for years. This is now built into the platform. It looks at latency, it looks like at packet loss, it looks at jitter. And these are network metrics that we care about for real-time communication. Because you see, we are measuring different things for Exchange, we're measuring different things for SharePoint and OneDrive, and we're measuring different things for Teams. And in the case where I had the issue where we had to halt the project, they have been using Office 365 for years because it was good enough on Exchange. It was good enough on SharePoint, although they had gotten some comments that it was slow on the work network, but it wasn't like breaking. It was very difficult for them to get started investigating this. And then we saw that the Teams metrics, when you do the call, right, or you do a meeting and you get choppy video, you get packet loss, and like the audio is varying in quality. That's not good, and that will be considered as a failure for a project like this and create a lot of user noise on the first line support. So what can we do in order to view this? So the report reader has access to this, and of course a global administrator has access to this platform. There are some requirements, and keep in mind that this is measuring the desktop client, so not the mobile client or the web client. So you need to have the Windows Location Service enabled, and you need to, for best effort, and I'm going to show you that, you need to provide Microsoft with some information about your environment so you can pinpoint where you're actually located. And you can do your own testing as well and gather those centrally. So let's look at that. So I want to look at what this looks like in the productivity score, but then I also want to expand on this and show you that you need to care about the Teams Network Planner. You need to care about call analytics, the real-time analytics, and even the call quality dashboard. This is your toolbox for making sure that Teams is performing as it should. And it's also your toolbox to investigate why it's not performing as expected. And also your toolbox to find out if it was like a fluke. Is it that ticket that you have at the service desk right now, is it just for that user? Or could it be that that location has connectivity issues? That's something we can use this tool to pinpoint. The challenge of investigating performance issues, especially on the network, is that it's so connected. It's connected to the performance of your client, your PC. Do you have an old PC? Do you have driver issues? Do you have firmware issues? Do you have network card issues? Do you have issues with your headset? And is the problem between here and the computer, or is it the actual computer as well? And then is it your Wi-Fi in the office? Is it your switches and routers? Is it your network edge? Is it your ISP provider? There is so much that can go wrong in this process. Our job is to remove as many unknowns as possible and look at this process as if you're into astronomy, you know that like finding an exoplanet on a distant star, what we're looking for, we're not able to see the exoplanet itself. We see the wobble of the sun, and we see the dimming of the light of the sun, which then gives us an idea that there is probably an exoplanet there. So we can't see them directly. And this is kind of what we are looking at for when we're investigating performance issues as well. We cannot see the issue directly, but we can find out as much as possible about the chain of the where the issues could be, so that you can rule out what it's not. And that's what we're doing here. So let's take a look. Again, back at the productivity score, because this is part of the productivity score. And we are now going into the technology experience. So technology experience measures not that users are using it correct, not that users are actually using Teams or Outlook and so on. Now we're diving into how it's experienced by the user. Endpoint analytics, you can connect in here as well. What's interesting with endpoint analytics, if you dive into it, is that you can see startup score, boot score, sign-in score. People, this could be some of the major productivity blockers for organizations. If your computer takes 5 minutes to boot, and then takes 5 minutes to log into your computer, and then takes 10 minutes to sign into Teams, you have spent 15 minutes or 20 minutes just to get access to the platform. Of course, that no one has that, but if you have that, that's definitely something you need to investigate. And so this then it will show you that you need to look into how can we reduce boot time? How can we make sure that we have the correct hardware? What are the reasons for slow boot time? And maybe we should move more over to modern management, where modern management is moving away from group policies, moving away from logon scripts, and moving over to Intune and hybrid management. Also, we want to look at app reliability. How often does your app crash? And if you have apps that crash too often, that's definitely something you need to look into. And what we're looking at here is context switching, actually. Context switching is a huge pain point for information workers. If I need to go into Word and I'm like, I'm going to do this now. I'm going to go into Word, create this document, get the information in there, and 5 minutes later, I'm still waiting for that. That moment has passed. Now I need to restart my productivity. That is what we're measuring here. And then we have the network connectivity, but also I just want to mention Microsoft 365 App Health, which shows you the health of your Office suite. But let's dive into network connectivity. So now we go into Microsoft 365 network connectivity. You see you have a network assessment here. You see quite good scores on Exchange, SharePoint, and Teams, but it's not perfect. No one is perfect, actually. And we see that where in our platform we are connecting from. So we are connecting from a couple of locations. What's interesting here is that this information out of the box is completely useless. Yes, I said it. It's completely useless, because how do you know if people are working from the home office, from Starbucks, from their favorite cabin, their favorite hotel, maybe? How do you know that? And you don't, actually. So you need to tell Microsoft where you are, what are your locations, so you can actually add locations as an admin. And that's definitely something you should go in and do. And here you see that, yes, the location that we actually have an office, it's green. We have a great connectivity there. So we remove all those home offices, those networks we don't have any control over, so that we can look at the networks we care about. So by going into insights, we can get some information out of this, and we can go into locations, and this is where you can add the location. And by going into add the location, and the page crashed, so that's great. So we go into here, locations, and add location. In add location, you are able to define your public IP address, the IP address you are presenting yourself with when breaking out from that location. It could be that you have direct internet connectivity, then you want to define the IP address that you are presenting yourself with, or the users are presenting themselves with in the platform. So, but it could be a centralized breakout. And what you want to do is document this location presents itself with this public IP address, and it comes from these subnets, which means that what you need to do, and you will see I come back to this, is that you need to document your networks, your locations, all the subnets you have, number of users per location. You need to document the bandwidth quality. You need to document the public IP addresses you're presenting yourself with, because this is very useful information, and we can reuse this in all these different tools I'm showing you. So there's one more thing, which is super interesting here. So if you go back to network connectivity, and we go back to network connectivity, you see here, you have the network connectivity test. Let me zoom in on this. Network connectivity test. This test is fantastic. It is the latest iteration of Microsoft validation of your environment. Here you see, you can sign in to this web page, which means that my report will actually be uploaded to the Microsoft 365 Network Monitor, and then you can run the test. So now the test is actually running, and it will measure everything we talked about: Exchange, SharePoint, Teams. And I'm just going to show you what a test looks like, and also what a bad test looks like. So a bad test looks like this. Here I'm in the US, and I'm connecting to my Exchange through Norway. That's not optimal, which means I will have a high latency on Exchange. And then you will see that on how I connect. I'm connected DNS in Norway while I'm located in Orlando, Florida, and that's not optimal, especially for Exchange. 136 milliseconds, and you remember that's a low score. We should, here you actually state that you should have 135 milliseconds improvement possibility here. So this is not good, people. But then we look at SharePoint. SharePoint is doing great. You see 9 to 10 megabits per second, which is good. So yeah, that's approved. But this is not good on the Exchange side. It's room for improvement. Exchange still works though, just slow and not optimal. But then we look at Teams. We see that connectivity is fine for audio and video, so that's not a problem. But the problem here is latency, which should be below 100 milliseconds. And we see jitter, which should be below 30 milliseconds. And what's interesting with this is that, yes, it's below what is accepted, but you have no margin for error here, which means that this is not good enough. If your network is having a bad day, you will exceed what's proper here. And also in terms of jitter, this is not good enough. So this is what a bad report looks like. This is what we can report in, and we get an overview of what it looks like. And it's easy for users to do these tests, and you should do it at the end user site, and you should do it at the network edge for your location. Maybe you can identify that, yes, overall, we are connecting to in a great way, but this location has some issues. And what we want to avoid by doing this is that support tickets that states it works better at home. Yes, that's the hands down worst message we can get, because then people lose trust in your environment, lose trust in your deployment, and they don't like coming into the office. So that's what you get out of this. But let me quickly show you some other locations for where you want to put in the same information, because there are some other locations. What we want to go into here is locations, and we want to go into analytics and reports and reporting labels. Reporting labels tells call analytics where you are. So we are again defining the subnets, your breakout, and the location you are at, because the reporting label, when you go into a user, manage users, you search for me, and you search for the user, you go into meetings and calls, and here you can see that here's a call, and you can see the location is being defined in this. But let's find a different call here where maybe this one is better. No, it's the exact same, but it will define the location I'm in. So you don't have to investigate what kind of location this subnet is at. So that's where we will find that. The next location is the call quality dashboard. The call quality dashboard is the trend of performance of teams in your environment. Again, you can go into location enhanced reports, and then scroll down into this by location. So here you can then filter on this location, and then you will see all traffic for this location. So the information is not that useful unless you start giving and showing Microsoft where you are, what your subnets are, how do you break out. Then this becomes a very useful and powerful tool. So productivity score, network planner is also where you can plan this. Network planner is found under planning, network planner, and this is where you can fill out information, and Microsoft will tell you, do you have enough bandwidth for your location based on number of users, based on number of meeting rooms in here. So productivity score, where you can find the Microsoft 365 network tool, Teams network planner, call analytics per user, and now you can even do real-time analytics, which you also find in the same location as I showed you for that user, so that you can monitor a call live. This is rolling out now as general availability, and you should see it in your tenant. And then you have the call quality dashboard. All these tools together will help you investigate performance issues. And then let's round off here and look at notifications and alerts. So this is the how you can monitor your devices, especially your Teams room devices are based on Windows, where you can get some notifications and alerts. So what this looks like is that you can go in and you find this under notifications and alerts and rules. This is where you will find this. And here you cannot define this rule. This is an out-of-the-box rule, but you can make sure it's active, and you can add the different devices you want to see here, and it will give you an alert if the device goes offline. And I believe it's offline for between 5 and 10 minutes. So it's not like instantly offline, but if it stays offline, then it will give you an alert. And then you can define here if you want to use a webhook and put it into a ticketing system, or maybe you want to do it in a channel. So that's the kind of monitoring you have for devices, and get some proactive responses on that, and get some instead of your users telling you that the room isn't functioning properly, you can say to the user, yeah, we are on it. We are about to solve the issue. Someone is already on the way to restart this device, or maybe make sure it has the proper settings so that it will become back online again. And so the monitoring rules, as I said, you find them in Teams Admin Center as well. And that rounds off the monitoring you can do within Microsoft Teams. We looked at how to analyze the usage patterns. So we want to look at, okay, the users are using Teams, but are the users using chat channels? Are they using calling? How much is it that they use it? What can we do through access reviews? Again, this is reporting built into Azure Active Directory, where instead of you creating like customized routines, you get an integrated routine to make sure that the proper users have access to what they should have. The productivity score, we talked about the productivity score. I really enjoy looking at the productivity score, and look at the research, people. Not that you should like blindly copy what Microsoft says, saving 2 hours just by working on online files. Maybe you can do that, but if you save 5 minutes, save 10 minutes, that's a lot as well if you have a large organization. And but look at the research to learn the jargon so that you can create your own metrics, your own KPIs, build your own business case. I think this is a great learning opportunity. And then using the network connectivity dashboard and populate the network connectivity dashboard, because I heard people say it's not that useful and it should get better. No, it doesn't need to get better. You need to populate with your information so it starts to get useful for you. And the clients will automatically send the information, and you can do your manual tests. But make sure you populate the rest of the tools as well, and know what kind of tool can measure what kind of performance, individual performance, in the call analytics, trending performance, in the call quality dashboard, and make sure you have your planning done right so that you know that you have enough bandwidth using the network planner. All these tools are available in the platform. Start using them, people. And then if you have Teams rooms, you can monitor those. Make sure you get a notification in your team or your ticketing system so that you can proactively start fixing them. And that concludes our Learn Live experience and walkthrough. If you haven't already watched our episode on Explore Microsoft Teams, plan and deploy Microsoft Teams, implement governance for Microsoft Teams, I urge you to do that. And when you have looked through all these videos, then you are ready to ace your assessment. You're ready to complete your learning module, and I wish you good luck with that. So by that, go into the platform, complete it, and from Martina and myself, thanks for watching.